Hello, good evening, and welcome to this fantastic webinar to kick off Laudato Si Week. This is a great opportunity this week to be considering how we follow up on 6 years and celebrate Laudato Si in what is a critical year for us. And welcome to all those people who I can see who are joining us from all around the world and who are making your comments in the comment box. You're very welcome. I think you're going to see something on the slide now about interpretation. This is going to take place in English as a main language, but there is interpretation available. If you click on, I can't actually see, I hope you can see that on the screen. Yes, if you click on the right language, you can scroll down, choose your own language, and that will be great. And then please do make comments in the comment box. It's you'll be able to follow it in your own language using that. And you have to go to laudatosiweek.org in order to be able to get the live interpretation. It's not on this particular screen. It's on laudatosiweek.org, and then scroll down. So on this amazing week, and we've got a great evening. My name is Christine Allen. I'm the director of CAFOD, which is the development agency for England, the Catholic Church in England and Wales. And it's a brilliant, brilliant opportunity for us. I'm so pleased to be hosting tonight's conversation. And please take the photo of me off the screen. It's awful. But before we start, we are going to place ourselves in the presence of God, and we are going to say the special 6th anniversary prayer of Laudato Si. Creator God, we thank you for the gift of life which you lovingly wove into being. We confess we have not cared for your creation. Your world grows hotter, hungrier, sicker, and the people and planet cry out for hope. In your love, Lord, we answer, for we know that things can change. Give us the courage to bring Laudato Si to life, to care for all communities and species suffering from environmental harm. Bless all who labour for an integral ecology, that they might inspire others to discover your face in our suffering and beautiful world. We ask this in Jesus' name, Amen. So welcome everybody, and it's fantastic to see the people and places from all around the world that are signing up, making comments in our comment box. So good evening to all of you. And this week is a really critical week for us. It's a fantastic opportunity to celebrate and commemorate the 6th anniversary of Laudato Si. We've got a whole raft of events that are taking place as part of this week of programme. It's a week where we celebrate and local and global, all of the key messages of Laudato Si, that amazing landmark document. And of course, Laudato Si, it's not a manifesto, but it certainly offers us a pathway for how we can build that better world. We're hearing that from so many politicians, a lot of rhetoric and a lot of talk about how we can build a better world or build back better, particularly after COVID. But you know, we are really seeing that our politicians could do with listening and reading Laudato Si. So hopefully tonight might be an opportunity to do that. And of course, 2021 is a critical year. Everything that we were hoping to do last year in preparation for both the UN Climate Conference, the COP26, we're making preparations for that for later in the year. But also this year we have the UN Biodiversity Conference, COP15. And and of course we have the G7 event too, but we have all of these opportunities to be pushing and promoting an integral ecology type of approach. So tonight is a great opportunity to start off our week of celebrations and activities, and I've got 3 amazing speakers lined up for you tonight. We'll hear from the Vatican, the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, and also from Indigenous and youth leaders who will reflect on the key role that these conferences play in this year and for the world, and how, particularly in a post-COVID world, how we can still change a course and how we can really bring about that kind of world that we so much long for. How we can achieve our global goals, how we can restore the harmony between humanity and nature, and of course build a culture that is enshrined and marked by justice and care for creation. So in this critical year, we pray, we act, and we call for change. And we hope that you will leave this webinar inspired to take action. There will be plenty of ideas of the sort of actions that people can take as we progress through the evening. So I'm going to introduce our three panelists. They bring huge expertise to our discussions tonight, and three very different perspectives. They'll each speak for about 10 minutes, and then we will take comments and questions from yourselves. As I said, please post your questions or your comments using the comment function that you've all been very good at doing so far. There's a team behind the scenes that will help me to organise the questions and comments, particularly if they're in different languages, and will hopefully make the best use of our time. So, to introduce our panel, our first speaker, I'm just going to introduce them all briefly, and then I will go and invite them in to speak. So our first panel is Ditibogo Lebeire. She is a global youth movement representative, climate activist, and in her day job is Programme Associate at the Youth Programmes of the South African Institute of International Affairs. She's a hugely experienced person. She's worked with young people from all over the world on advocacy issues and policy making. She's passionate about climate change and climate justice, most importantly, as well as the youth advocacy aspect. She understands and will reflect on the detrimental effects of climate change on humanity, and most importantly, why the voices of young people are not at the table, the decision-making tables. And that's something that she's acutely aware of herself, having attended COP22 through to 25 as a junior negotiator. She's incredibly brilliant. She holds an undergraduate degree and is currently pursuing a postgraduate qualification in sustainable development at Stellenbosch University. And as part of that team of young climate activists working on developing a South African youth climate action plan, it's the local as well as the global that she can reflect on. So Ditibogo is our first speaker. I'm really pleased to welcome her. Our second speaker is a representative of Indigenous communities of Amazonia, Jose Gregorio Diaz Mirabal, and he's the general coordinator of the Indigenous organizations of Cuenca, so COICA. And we'll talk, COICA actually represents over 500 different Indigenous communities across 9 countries in the Amazon region. And much is said about the need for us to learn from the communities of Amazonia about how we treat the earth and the relationship we have with it. And we can learn a lot from Indigenous communities about that. And our third speaker is Father Augusto Zampini from the Dicastery for promoting integral human development. And he's currently leading the Vatican COVID-19 Commission. He was a qualified lawyer before entering seminary. His area of expertise is now moral theology, but he also holds a master's degree in international development. He's been an advisor to the Amazon Synod, and Father Augusto is well known around the world as he travels to take the message of Catholic social teaching to audiences ranging from local churches through to the World Economic Forum. So between those three, what an amazing set of different perspectives and views that will surely enrich our discussions tonight. So, without further ado, I would like to go first to Ditibogo, who's our first speaker from South Africa, and as you remember what I said, an amazing experienced person of actually being at COPs and the importance of the youth voice at the decision-making tables. Over to you, Ditibogo. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Christine. Good evening to our amazing moderator, fellow panelists, and all the guests that are joining us today. Before we begin, I would like us to take a moment to reflect. I would like to ask you all to close your eyes and think about how life was when you were 10 years old. It feels good, right? You have good memories, you feel safe, you feel happy, and you're excited about your future. What I would like us not to all do is to open our eyes. We are currently living through very trying and defining times. We are living through a global pandemic brought forth by the COVID-19 virus, the climate crisis, and the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict, amongst many other issues faced globally. As a young person, I am disappointed in the state of the world and, frankly, really scared. The climate crisis has opened our eyes to just how greedy we are as humans and how we have lost our moral compass. The science has been clear. We need to change our relationship with the planet. We have less than 9 years to save the world from irreversible damage. As a young person who is the custodian of the present and the future, I can't help but ask, are we doing enough to save the planet? I would like to share a story about how I became a climate activist. My grandparents used to live in a rural province in South Africa called Limpopo. All my best childhood memories are from there. I would remember driving home from Johannesburg, where my mother and I used to stay because of work opportunities, and what used to be really green scenery with the rivers flowing on the side of the highway, where we would spot some animals, became bone dry. The infrastructure in Limpopo is underdeveloped, so this meant limited access to water, and crops didn't grow like they used to. My family experienced random flash floods and really bad droughts that affected the way they and the people in the community lived. As I learned about climate change at school, I knew that my family and communities in Limpopo needed to be in the room, but couldn't. So my voice would be then present to help share their reality. As a young person, I believe that climate justice is social justice. Climate justice is intersectional. I'm thinking about the lived reality of people in vulnerable communities, people in South Africa. Social issues such as unemployment, inequality, access to electricity, crime, gender-based violence, and so many more still plague our society. As young people, we are inheriting a world that is nothing like what we pictured when we were 10. And that is why I have been part of and supported the global youth-led call for climate justice. We need world leaders to place urgent action on the climate crisis, with understanding that it poses an existential threat to humanity. The global pandemic has opened our eyes to social injustice and the adverse effects of climate change on vulnerable communities. It has presented the perfect opportunity for us to also course correct. To change the system in place to allow us, for us to adequately address the climate crisis in a way that ensures no country is left behind and everyone finds their way in the discourse. Young people have, considering these times, continued to advocate for climate justice online by attending meetings, webinars, creating awareness on the crisis on social media, as well as calling for global action. But I can't help but ask if, as the leaders in our society, can we honestly say that we have done enough to address issues of sustainable development in our communities, in our countries, and globally? Over the past years, I have worked with young people in South Africa, in the African continent, and globally to discuss our vision of the world and how we think we can get there. Principles such as intersectionality, good governance, safety, and equality have emerged. These are principles that ideally every society should possess and should be reflected in climate policies. The world is failing young people because we are faced with we're forced to inherit the world is failing young people because we are forced to inherit a society we do not deserve. and it has become really difficult to shape the society because the decision-making spaces are usually difficult to break into, and is a space mostly occupied by the older generation. It is exclusionary in nature, not only for young people, but people from the most vulnerable and rural communities. But I must admit that the space is beginning to value the input of young people. However, it needs to be meaningful engagement. There must be intergenerational exchanges in order for us to achieve a sustainably developed world that we want to live in. As a Christian myself, I always believed in the extraordinary and influential role the church has played in society. The church has served as a moral compass for society and helped lead society. I would like to call on the church to continue to lead the plight against the climate crisis, to take decisive action and lead, help change behavior in our society by educating our society, by also adapting to more sustainable practices, and by claiming your role in decision-making structures and speaking for your communities. Addressing the climate crisis and transitioning to a low-carbon economy must put the people first. The Lord's creation is not for sale. My final words for tonight, and I hope we can engage more during the questions and answer session, is for us to think through the world we would like to live in and leave for future generations. Let us think through our skills, our passions, and our abilities, and use those skills, passions, and abilities to find our role in climate action. Let's act now and act together. Thank you.
Titibogo, thank you so much. Extremely powerful words there. And you're absolutely right. You know, the church has such an influential role in society. I remember being in Paris for the climate negotiations there and hearing the world's leaders, the way in which they talked. It was so different to previous COPs. It was so different to how we'd heard world leaders speak in the past, because they were talking about a moral imperative. And I remember talking to some British civil servants at the time saying, this is so different, you know, how is this happening? And they were saying, well, you know, this is Pope Francis has had an impact here. This is you guys, this is the church that has actually helped us do this. And we've seen that kind of shift over the last 6 years at all sorts of different levels. And also you're absolutely right about how young people have shown such witness, not just because you're inheriting a future that we have left, you know, let you down on, but also because you're showing and telling us what is wrong. And I remember hearing, it was just a couple of years ago at a lobby that we had in London, and there was I think she was about 13, talking to a politician, talking to an MP who was really kind of patronizing her. And she actually said, you know, this should be the other way around. You should be telling me what change needs to happen. You know, you're supposed to be the grown up, you know. And it was so brilliant to actually see that kind of how she was almost challenging these politicians to step up and do it, in not to fail us. So thank you so much for that, kicking us off tonight on that talk, Titibogo. So many kind of experiences that are really great. So please do post your comments in the comment box, and if there are any further conversations that we can have in our time later on. So fantastic. Thank you so much. So we're having some slight technical problems with our second speaker, Jose Gregorio, joining us. So I'm going to move straight on to Father Augusto Zampini, who is being very patient, waiting there and listening. Father Augusto and I have been on a couple of panels together, so he knows what I'm like. So really great to have you, Father Augusto. I gave you your introduction properly before. So it's really great to have you here and to be able to follow on from what Titibogo was talking about in terms of the role of the church and the potential to take us forward. And obviously, Laudato Si Week is it's going to be kind of quite a special week for you. I hope you haven't been too exhausted by it so far. So I'm really pleased to welcome you to share your thoughts and reflections tonight in this webinar on the importance of the opportunities of this year particularly. Father Augusto, over to you.
Thank you, Christine. And can I share the screen? Is it possible? I don't know if it's hello.
I think we'll have to get the technical people behind. Can you share? Okay. You should be able to share your screen.
Yes, Father Augusto, you can share. Click the share button below the screen.
I have already done it, yeah. But and it appears to share.
Okay, then click on the screen you want to share and the blue button.
Yes, share. Well, okay. Anyway, otherwise I can talk without sharing. So thank you very much for this invitation, and happy Laudato Si week. And I will pick up with what the Tebogo said. No, well, powerful introductory talk. So what can the church do? So I think what we can do is to analyze the opportunities that we have in this context of pandemic. And do you remember that if we want to analyze something and to act, as the Tebogo was saying, we have to say what is not working. We have to be. So one thing is the crisis as expressed, the symptoms of the crisis. We have a COVID crisis, which is a public health crisis, really serious. But then we have a broken world and a political crisis, a security. You have seen all the conflicts that's going on around the world. And then we have an economic crisis, which the COVID has exacerbated: inequality, millions of people without jobs, uncertainty, an agricultural system that not necessarily is linked with ecosystems, and millions of people dying for food-related issues. And then on top of that, we have the climate crisis, as Tebogo was saying, the crisis, which is huge and is threatening the future. But those are the symptoms. If we want to change the crisis, to take the crisis as an opportunity, we have to go to the root-and roots, because root-and roots produce root-and fruits. So to change that, I would like you to share this brief journey of a couple of minutes to say, how can we change the root-and roots into healthy roots so as to produce abundant fruits? And for that, we have to see, well, what are the mentality or the root and roots that we have in all these crises? First of all, an extractivist mentality that we extract from the earth, we extract from people, we extract from others, without being related to them. And that is creating a massive problem, not just environmentally speaking, but socially speaking. What is another problem? That in a broken world where we are connected, we know what's going on, but we are indifferent, the globalization of indifference. We are not moved because we are focused on ourselves. So in this individualistic mentality, look at what's happening with the vaccines. This is not ridiculous. We want to be vaccinated, our group, my country. But if we are not all vaccinated, the vaccine won't work. So even it's to the level of irrationality. And then the consumerist mentality. We don't just extract things from the earth and from others, and we distribute it very unfairly, but we consume and we throw away. And this creates a culture, a throwaway culture, what Pope Francis wants. This is all embedded into the roots. Now, if we want to change this, we want to address this. Okay, the COVID has showed, as the Tebogo said, that this is terrible. All these crises are interconnected, and we need to go down below to the roots to heal it. So we are in 2021, at the beginning of the Laudato Si week. We need to take this crisis as an opportunity to go to the notion of integral ecology, that everything is interconnected. And integral ecology, as Laudato Si says, is inseparable from the notion of the common good. There's no place for being me and not we. There's no place for being disconnected with the earth. There's no place for being indifferent. So if we can connect that, we can produce some fruits. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, with love. So, well, yes. But love is not just interpersonal. Love is also social, as Fratelli Tutti very, very well explained, Pope Francis in his latest encyclical. No, it's social and it's also cosmological. If I don't love society and if I don't love creation, well, it's very difficult to care for society, for people, and for creation. If, on the other hand, I love them and I listen to the voice of the cry of the people, and particularly the poor and the vulnerable and the cry of the earth, that will touch me deeply, deeply, my roots, and that will provide a concrete foundation for the ethical and spiritual itinerary that follows. And that is also in Laudato Si 15. No? Christine was mentioning this ethical and spiritual itinerary that changed an international agreement. Well, but we need to change more. But first, we need to love, and therefore, if we love, we listen to the cry of those beloved. So that means that if we want to change this, to take the crisis opportunity in spirituality, in theology, we said conversion. Radical problems from the roots requires radical conversion or metanoia, which is not just personal, it's interpersonal, and it's also in the habitat, the way we live on this earth. Radical ecological conversion from the roots requires social and cosmological love. And if we manage to do that, if we agree with that, what are we prepared to do as a church? Good news. At the end of this week, we will promote the Laudato Si week, the Laudato Si goals. That is not necessarily the same as the Sustainable Development Goals, but they are roughly similar. How can we, the first goal, respond to the cry of the earth with our heart, respond to the cry of the poor with our heart, the second goal, to create an ecological economics, because the economy is one of the roots, the problems that is hurting the poor and the earth. To adopt simple lifestyles, because we cannot ask others to change if we don't change. To promote ecological education at schools, at university, yes, but also families and parishes, an education that can promote a cultural revolution, as Laudato Si says. All this with ecological spirituality, the sixth goal, that will help us to drive the change and to sustain it in time. And with community engagement and participation, because we cannot get out from these crises if we are not together. Not just not living, we need to leave no one behind. We need to include all sorts of wisdom, particularly the wisdoms of young people, wisdom of indigenous people, wisdom of entrepreneurs, wisdom of other religions. By doing that, then we can start healing the roots and promote some fruits. And also at the end of this week, these goals will be connected with a Laudato Si action platform, mega platform of creating a social movement worldwide that will start with ourselves, with the church, but we are inviting everyone, it's not exclusive. We are asking families, everybody has a family, parishes and dioceses, religious congregations, Catholic NGOs, but also organizations and groups, health institutions. The Catholic Church is one of the greatest health provider in the world. Hospitals and other healthcare services schools and universities, and also workers and business. They were all invited, this 7 group of people, to produce this Laudato Si action platform from below, so we can, from below, heal the roots and produce fruit. That will take us to the integral ecology healing on the decade of action of the United Nations. So from below, we want to create a movement and produce fruit. But at the same time, from the top, we want to, as Dietibogo was saying, we want to advocate, we want to help nations and leaders and global leaders to this change. That's why we have to work. We are working on the United Nations Food Summit, because we don't want the food crisis that apparently is going to have. We are going to have a very serious food crisis quite soon if we don't do something. And we need to, then we want to help with the COP15, the Convention on Biological Diversity. We cannot continue to work the earth without keeping it, without taking care for it. We cannot work the earth and destroy it at the same time. We want to influence also in the World Health Summit that is happening also this year, to promote a new public health system, a system that can not just respond to diseases, but can prevent diseases with a different lifestyle and with a different public health system globally. And also to COP26 that is happening in the UK this year, how to help countries to implement the Sustainable Development Goals and achieve their targets and push them or help them with ideas. In the end, caring for our common home, we are included, no? With a strong preference of the most vulnerable option for the poor, will help us to create a new universal solidarity, a universal fraternity, all brothers and sisters, also from below and from the top. You know? So this will allow us to prepare the future that we like. This will allow us to raise ambitions, and somebody will say, but are you not too naive? Are you not too, well, I don't know, because it's not too irrealistic, some of it. No, with the realism that only the gospel can provide, nothing is impossible to God and for the followers of God. Justice is not invincible. We can do this. We can regenerate society, not to recuperate or restart what was unjust, unsustainable, and unfair. We want to use this crisis, and I'm finished this, as an opportunity to regenerate something new. The only way of doing that is to cure the roots, the root and roots, and to heal those roots so as to produce abundant fruit and fruit for everyone. Thank you very much.
Augusto, thank you, Father Augusto. That is amazing. And I'm sure you can see in the comments as there were when Dieter Burger was speaking, amazing kind of comments coming out, lots of applauses and lots of hearts. Thank you so much, Padre Augusto. Absolutely super. And I think that sense of answering that question that Dieter Burger threw down to us about what's the role of the church in society. You've answered really well in terms of that different levels. And as other people have said, we can't wait to see the Laudato Si goals. But brilliant to hear the engagement of the church. And I particularly, I think, as people have said in the comments, that sense that this isn't about logic, this isn't just about rationality, but it is about touching ourselves as, it's about love. It is about, do we love one another? Do we love our planet? And of course, the preferential option for the poor is an essential part of that. It's a special love for the people who are affected so badly and disproportionately by climate injustice that happens in the world. But those challenges of really achieving change still remain. So let's reflect on that for. But absolutely right, from the root to the fruit. I love that. So I'm going to move on to our third speaker tonight. But before we do that, I need to ask you a bit of a favor, Father Augusto, because our speaker is Jose Gregorio Diaz Mirabal, and he's speaking in Spanish, and my Spanish is not good enough, I have to tell you, to act for a bit of translation. Would you be willing to help us to do some translation? I realize that this is very last minute, and I'm extremely grateful. Jose Gregorio, buen día, and buenos días. And so if it's really helpful for you, Father Augusto, to sort of do it as best you can, that would be great. Thank you. Jose Gregorio, buenas noches and welcome, bienvenidos to this discussion. Father Augusto will do some translation for you. Perhaps you need to explain that.
Jose
Sorry,
Gregorio, buenos días y bienvenido. Bienvenido. Y yo estoy invitado a hacer un poquito de traducción. La gente, igual tú puedes hablar en español y la gente, hay traductores oficiales que te escuchan, pero yo ayudo con Christine, que está moderando. Así que tú puedes sentirte libre de hablar en tu lengua. Yo intervengo nada más aquí en la moderación.
Gracias. Bueno, en primer lugar, sí me oyen.
Te escuchamos perfecto. Adelante.
Muy bien.
En primer lugar, bueno, Yo quiero agradecer a los espíritus de la selva, al agua, al aire, al fuego, a la tierra, por este espacio de diálogo que nos ha invitado a conversar, a dialogar en el marco de la encíclica Laudato Si, donde en el 2015 oímos a nuestro amigo, a nuestro hermano, el Papa Francisco, hacer un llamado mundial a toda la humanidad y lo llamó como el grito de la tierra, el grito de los pobres, el grito de los excluidos. Y hoy creemos que en este 2021 ese llamado de urgencia a todos en el planeta, hoy estamos en una situación peor que la del 2015. Estamos en una emergencia y estamos en un punto de no retorno. Estamos entre incendios y pandemia, entre exclusión, discriminación y muerte. Y es por eso que... Adelante.
Un segundo, Gregorio, que tengo que traducir, porque me dicen que no hay traducción. Así
Adelante.
La gente te puede escuchar. Un segundo, ¿eh?
Dale, tú me avisas.
Sí. So, José Gregorio was thanking everybody, and he started to thank also the spirit of the earth, the spirit of the fire, the spirit of the forest, the spirit of Mother Earth, basically. And he was also thanking Pope Francis for his encyclical Laudato Si, written in 2015, where he was calling to listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. But he said, today we are worse off than 2015, and we are in an emergency. We are reaching tipping points. We are on fire, literally fires, and this is very urgent and very sad. Gregorio, por favor, continúa.
Gracias. Hoy nuestro mensaje desde la cuenca amazónica es que no es posible que se pueda vivir sin el bosque, sin la naturaleza, sin los árboles, sin el agua. O sea, no hay vida. Y es increíble que el comercio mundial, las empresas transnacionales sigan incendiando y deforestando y destruyendo la selva amazónica cuando la economía mundial depende de los ecosistemas. Eso no lo entendemos. Ese sería el primer mensaje.
So from the Amazon, where Gregorio lives, he said that it's so easy to understand that you cannot live without the forests, without water. Without them, there's no life. So he said it's totally unbelievable that international companies and some countries and some people think that we can still destroy the forest, the water, and the Amazon, because without them, there's no life, there's no future. Por favor.
En estos momentos nos preocupa que, según datos científicos, en menos de 40 años ya hemos perdido 420,000 millones de hectáreas de bosque y se pierde 6,000 kilómetros cuadrados de bosque cada segundo. Y pareciera que esto no para. Y por allí vienen las pandemias, por allí vienen los asesinatos de nuestros hermanos por defender el territorio, y por eso estamos viviendo esta situación tan dramática en Brasil con los hermanos Yanomami, en Colombia con la minga, en toda la cuenca amazónica, producto de la minería ilegal, del extractivismo. Entonces, nosotros queremos hacer un llamado a todas las religiones del mundo. Si sumamos las religiones del mundo, casi somos más de 5,000 millones de personas, más los pueblos indígenas. Por favor, vamos a unirnos para revivir, para luchar, para salvar la vida del planeta.
So Gregorio said that today, according to scientific data, so we are destroying, more than 120,000 hectares of forest every year, and thousands of kilometers of forests are being destroyed every second. So he said that, and this is not stopping; it's getting worse. And he mentioned the situation in Brazil, the situation in Colombia with what's happening with the brothers, the Yanomami tribe. And he's saying this is happening also due to the illegal mining and to the extractivist activities. And he made a strong call for all religions. He said that if we all religions gather together alongside indigenous people, we are millions and millions of people. And if we are together, we can change this. Gregorio. Gregorio, ¿nos escuchas? Gregorio, we have lost him.
Augusto, I think we might have done. Yes, we were having some real technical difficulties getting him before, and it does look like we've lost him completely. So let's see about.
Here he is.
He's coming back. Augusto, I just want to say a massive thank you for stepping in on the translation side. I know it's not what you signed up for, but we really appreciate it enormously. And but we will. We're very, very grateful indeed.
It's very strong, the call for all religions alongside indigenous people, isn't it?
It is, and I think that sense of how much we can learn and respect the importance of indigenous people it's incredible, really. And I think this is a really good example of why it's so important to have the voices of indigenous people and vulnerable communities actually participating in the conversations, because the way in which they see the world, the way in which the relationship, I mean, you talked right at the very beginning there, that spirit of the earth being absolutely part of his whole approach is really, really critical. And I think it's at the heart, I think, of when Pope Francis talked about that kind of radical conversion. It's it's almost kind of like taking on board that depth of spirituality that indigenous communities have in terms of their relationships with the world. It does look like we have lost Gregorio again, I think. So I think we're suffering the experience there.
Yeah. So this shows, but this is important. This is a good sign, because now we are in the webinar era, no? But it's so difficult to get them even on board in these dialogues because they don't have the technology, you see, and we are missing that wisdom. So that's another challenge for us for the future, to prepare the future.
Absolutely, and I think you're absolutely right about the wisdom that we miss out there. So that's fine. So this feels like it's a good moment to perhaps move into a bit more of a dialogue between the three of us and taking on board the conversations and the comments that are coming through. I think if the team are going to work behind the scenes to see if we can get Gregorio back, he'll join us as and when he can. So there's quite a lot of a real buzz in the comments there. Some of the comments about getting Laudato Si out. I think it's really fascinating, because I don't know about you, but I've never come across a papal document that's had the kind of exposure within the church, let alone outside of the church, that Laudato Si has. And the fact that 6 years later it's still as relevant and topical and being talked about is so important. So I think that sense of there's still work to be done to get Laudato Si out. We've heard from both of you about the different levels of influence, and that's replicated and referenced in the comments as well, about the need to work at both the local, within our parishes, but also taking that right the way up to the global, and everything in between, particularly working with corporates. We've had references to jail, we've had references to prayer, so I think there's something really, really vital there. I think one of the questions for me is, from your both perspectives, how much of an opportunity do you think this year really offers for that course correction that Ditabogo you talked about? Are you feeling hopeful, or are you feeling, well, we just have to kind of force ourselves to sort of get on with it? Or do you feel somehow the spirit is moving? What's your view of the politicians that you've been engaging with? Maybe start with Ditabogo first, if that's all right. You've been very patient so far.
Thank you. I think we still have a long way to go. I think we're starting. I see Jose is back, but let me just finish my remark.
Yeah.
I think we are definitely starting to also recognize and bring other stakeholders into the conversation. Like we now in the webinar, we have people from an Indigenous background in the meeting. We also have young people in the meeting. So we're starting to get other people's voices, especially in decision-making and policy-making spaces. But I think we still need to work on making it more meaningful. I think for now, it's still a bit more tokenistic in the sense that they're just filling up space in the room. But we need to get them to engage a bit more, to also understand policies, how policies are formulated, what policies mean, how they can be implemented as well, so that people can also find themselves as implementing bodies in climate policies more especially. And so I think, yeah, a lot more needs to just be done in the policy space, both internationally and nationally. Internationally, just speaking about the case of African young people, there are still very few African young people at COP negotiations, for example. And so African young people who carry up most of the youth demographic in Africa are still excluded from those discussions. We are still seeing how as well Indigenous people from Africa and from small island developing states are also not heavily present in climate negotiations more globally. And that makes you question then, are they also then part of the discussions at a local level? And the answer is sometimes not really. I'm thinking of as well in South Africa, we usually have our stakeholder meetings or stakeholder meetings every time a policy comes about, so that people can actually comment on what policies are being formulated, and that's part of the democratic process that South Africa has. And unfortunately, those meetings are usually in Johannesburg, so it means obviously then the most privileged people are a part of the discussion. And if they are then, if they do go provincial, because now with the NDC process, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment has gone to different provinces to try and get input from there. But still trying to then, I think from my side, there is no term for the word climate change in SPED. And so it's very difficult to then translate it. And, you know, people can see it, they see the effects, but it's very difficult for them maybe to articulate it and to come up as well. They do have solutions. I think the indigenous knowledge systems are there and the indigenous knowledge is there. But it's sometimes very difficult to articulate in the way that sometimes the policy needs you to articulate it, or decision makers want you to articulate. But then again, it goes back to the thing of being in the room and being able to meaningfully engage in the room. And I think that's still something that we really, really need to work on. For the church as well, I'm going back, there were some comments as well where people were like, you're speaking to the converted. What about people that don't want to hear this, they don't believe in the climate crisis as well, and that's where education then comes in. I know in my church, for example, I'm not Catholic, but I'm Lutheran, and in my church we always try, and for example the quote on salvation is not for sale came from our Reformation celebration in 2017, and so they're trying to as well in their preaching as well try and connect back to the ecology and learning more about climate change and what people can do to actually adapt and to change.
Thank you, Ditabogo. I think that's absolutely right, and I think you talk about the barriers, the language barriers. We've experienced that even tonight. The language, the technology, the access, and I think that sense of, even if we are speaking the same language, in terms of idioma, we might actually be speaking such different experiences that we're not even understanding one another. And I think that that's where Pope Francis's call for that culture of encounter is so critical, that it's not just a kind of, yes, I'm just going to listen to you for a while, but I'm going to carry on, but I'm going to listen to you and be willing to be moved by that experience. And I think that that's why the voices of young people, Indigenous people, so critical in these processes. Father Augusto, would you be willing to help bring Gregorio back in terms of perhaps he had some final comments, but also that question about his confidence in terms of the potential for the politicians. So let's go back to the conversation before. Thank you.
Sure. Gregorio, como estamos teniendo problemas técnicos, Christine, la moderadora, tuvo que continuar. Entonces, le hizo una pregunta a Dite Bogo, que es una joven de Sudáfrica, sobre los indígenas en Sudáfrica, ¿no? Y la cuestión política. Le preguntó cómo veía ella el problema, y Dite Bogo contestó, bueno, hay ciertos caminos, pero falta mucho por hacer. Y dice que los indígenas ahí en Sudáfrica ven las cosas, tienen soluciones, pero a veces es una cuestión de traducirlo y ponerlo en un paquete que los políticos puedan entender y lo puedan aplicar. No sé cómo tú ves el problema político, cómo lo vives, si quieres comentar algo sobre eso, y con los indígenas que ven los problemas, que tienen soluciones, pero cómo se traduce en políticas públicas. No sé si quieres hacer algún comentario al respecto.
Bueno, aprovechar la señal para decir que nosotros tenemos grandes soluciones, pero no son oídas nuestras soluciones. Dicen que el 80% de la biodiversidad y el 30% de los territorios mejor conservados están en los territorios indígenas nuestros. Pero ¿cuál es la respuesta de los gobiernos y de las empresas? Deforestación, agrotóxico, ganadería intensiva, petróleo, minería ilegal, y eso va en contra de nuestra visión de conservación, de lucha, de defensa del territorio. No sé si puedes traducir esa parte.
Muy importante, sí, gracias. So Gregorio was saying that we asked almost the same question that Christine asked to Dietibogo about indigenous people and politics. He said that indigenous people in the Amazon have lots of proposals for solving the crisis, but he said that they are not heard. The proposals are not heard. He mentioned that 80% of the biodiversity is hosted by indigenous territories, and what is the response to the destruction of biodiversity? More deforestation, the use of agrochemicals, illegal mining, the concession for an agricultural system that is not sustainable, etc. So he said that he's seeing this in a quite negative way because they have the territory, they have the solution, they know how to relate to the earth, but he mentioned countries and international companies are not listening. Sí, Gregorio, puedes continuar.
Y bueno, nosotros estamos preocupados y queremos enviar un mensaje al mundo. En este proceso de exterminio en la cuenca amazónica de los pueblos indígenas y de nuestros territorios, a pesar de todo eso, nosotros podemos decir que todavía en la cuenca amazónica hay 400.000 millones de árboles vivos que no queremos que se destruyan. Y estamos los 3 millones de pueblos indígenas que estamos vivos a pesar de la pandemia y a pesar de los asesinatos y de la violencia en la Amazonía. No sé si puedes traducir.
Sí, cómo no. So Gregorio says that he is very worried, he's very concerned, and he wants to send a message, but they want to send a message to the world from the Amazon basin. He said that regardless of this extinction of biodiversity and COVID and killings, In the Amazon basin today, there are more than 400,000 million trees alive. And there are more than 3 million indigenous people alive. And he said that he wants to send the message that they are alive and they are part of the earth, and they are willing to promote a different system that is enduring for everybody. Sí, Gregorio.
Augusto, nosotros queremos exigir al mundo en este momento, a todas las religiones del mundo, a toda la humanidad, que se restablezca el equilibrio con la madre tierra, que haya oraciones y acciones para buscar el equilibrio con la madre tierra y con la vida. Eso pedimos hoy y queremos denunciar ante el mundo de que los gobiernos han avalado una propuesta de solo salvar el 30% de la tierra. Nosotros no estamos de acuerdo porque eso sería catastrófico para los pueblos indígenas y para el mundo. Nosotros decimos que hay que luchar para salvar el 50% del planeta, de la tierra del planeta. Y en la Amazonía hay que hacer el esfuerzo entre todos para salvar el 80% de la selva amazónica. No queremos un 30%. Entonces, ese es el mensaje final. Le enviamos un mensaje al jefe de la Iglesia Católica, al Papa Francisco, que siga siendo valiente, que siga luchando por el planeta, y que ese sínodo por la Amazonía, ese Laudato Si, sigue siendo un compromiso con nosotros también, que estamos aquí luchando, dando la vida y por el territorio. Gracias.
So he said, Gregorio said that he wants to ask, or more than ask, he wants to claim the world, all religions and humanity, human family. He's claiming and begging to restore the relation, the balance with Mother Earth and with life. He wants to denounce in the name of his people here in the Amazon that the governments wants to save only the 30% of the earth. This is in the 30% conservation strategy for the biodiversity COP. No, so he totally disagree on that, but they totally disagree on that, because this will be terrible for indigenous people and for the world. He said that we have to preserve, or use a different policy of conservation to preserve at least 50% of our natural life, and in the Amazon 80%, because, well, I said, if we don't preserve 80% of the Amazon, the Amazon will be a different world. No? So he sends this final message to the leader of the Catholic Church, to Pope Francis. He encourages to keep being strong and working for the people and the planet. And this Synod of the Amazon and the Laudato Si, they are totally committed to implement that and to live in balance and in relationship with Mother Earth.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Muchas gracias para todos. And all strength to you, Gregorio. We have a really useful question that I'd like to ask, if you don't mind, Augusto, one more time. Gregorio's view in terms of what do you think we as communities and all of the participants in tonight's webinar from around the world, what can they ask? What can we ask of our governments to make sure that that they are hearing the voices of young people and indigenous people around, particularly in the COPs that we have this year? So it'd be useful if you could ask Gregorio, and then Dieter Boger, we could get your perspective from what do we need to be asking our governments in terms of hearing the voices of young people. But if Gregorio could answer that.
Gregorio, Christine te agradece. Dice que hay mucha gente viendo este webinar en el mundo, mucha gente joven y mucha gente, pero si te hace una pregunta adicional. Dice, ¿qué le dirías a esta gente que está hoy? Comenzamos la semana de Laudato Si con este webinar, que está comprometida, que está trabajando en distintas situaciones. ¿Cuál sería tu mensaje para nosotros? ¿Qué le podemos decir? ¿Qué les puedes decir a esta gente para que nosotros podamos traducir el mensaje de la gente joven, de los indígenas, a nuestros propios gobiernos, nuestros propios líderes, y para que se puedan ¿no? Restaurar este balance con la madre tierra. ¿Cuál sería tu mensaje para los que nos están escuchando?
Primero, que nunca callen, que no hagan silencio ante la muerte, que no hagan silencio ante la muerte, ante la destrucción del planeta. Que salgan que vayan a la iglesia, que salgan de sus casas, pero salgan a la calle también a defender, porque todo está conectado, como decía el Laudato, todo está conectado. Para nosotros también todo está conectado. Entonces, todavía tenemos la oportunidad de salvar el planeta.
So déjame que traduzca esto. So first he said, we cannot keep silent. So he encourages us all to speak out to our governments, to our churches, to celebrate, because we still have the opportunity to care for the earth. So he encourages, there's no possibility to remain silent or indifferent. Sí, Gregorio, continúa.
No hay otra posibilidad de hacerlo. O sea, hoy todavía tenemos agua, tenemos bosque, todavía tenemos vida, pero cada segundo se está destruyendo la vida. No permitamos eso. Seamos responsables. Pensemos en la nueva generación que merece vivir lo que todavía tenemos. Y por favor, que Europa y los países desarrollados no sigan consumiendo oro, petróleo, no sigan construyendo un modelo que no sirve para la Amazonía. Ese modelo de desarrollo destruye a la Amazonía, derriba los árboles, contamina nuestros ríos, quema nuestra casa. No hagamos eso. Gracias.
So he said that there's no other way. He said there's no other way because we still have forest, we still have water, we still have life. But every second we are destroying the forest, the water, and life. So we need to think in this and in the next generations, no? That we are preventing them to live this, to inherit this. And he finally asked Europe and the developed countries or rich countries to stop using oil, gold, and to stop this with this development model that is destroying the indigenous people and forests. He said that he asked for a change in the development model because this is not sustainable for everybody, but it's destroying them in particular. Gracias, Gregorio. Ahora vuelvo a Christine.
Gracias, Gregorio. And so, Ditibogo, from your perspective, I would imagine that there's quite a bit of resonance there in terms of, you know, the voices of young people that need to be heard, in terms of feeling a bit similar to Gregorio and the work of indigenous communities. What do you have anything particularly that you wanted to add on that?
Not much. I think I resonate definitely completely with the comments made by Jose, but I think I also spoke about it a bit more, that it is important for young people especially to be a part of those, to be part of decision-making tables and also get their voices heard. But it's also important for young people as well to, within their communities as well, to also consult with members of their community, to consult with other young people, so that they're not speaking for themselves alone as individuals, but they're speaking for a larger constituency, and they have more backing, and they understand more what do people really need, and what do young people really need, and what are young people really saying. But yes.
Well, I think it was also fantastic to hear Gregorio talking about the fact that, you know, indigenous communities do have solutions. This is, you know, these are not people that don't know what is going on in the world. They understand it much more directly than many of the people who are the negotiators around the table. So, and I guess, again, similar for you as young people, it's not that you don't know. I have a 15-year-old daughter who, you know, constantly, you know, kind of is reminding me of my failures and things we have to do around the house. So, you know, even at that level, I think it's really critical to be recognizing the solutions that people have. And it's about getting those voices heard, not assuming that it's that we have those answers. Father Augusto, I don't know if you want to help kind of doing more translations for Gregorio, so he's part of that conversation. I want to say a word to the people who are doing the comments. Thank you so much for your nice comments. I think what we're interested in as well is, are there particular messages that you feel that you want us to be reflecting, or things that you would want to see in that we make sure that get presented to things like the COPs this year? What are the kind of particular challenges that you want to see flagged up by us? So that's great. I think that thing about we're all working to try and influence our own governments in our own way. But also I think there's something really important about recognizing that there are numbers of levels here, and that is something that's really critical within Laudato Si, that it's about a personal life, personal conversion. It's what happens in our community, in our parishes, as well as in our wider communities, and then obviously influencing our national governments and hopefully international bodies too. And the church is active on all of those levels, and we as part of the church are active on all those levels. And I think particularly, as you've said, Ditabogo, it's not something that we do on our own. We have to do it together. And I think, certainly CAFOD's joining part of other ecumenical and interfaith mobilizations is so critical. And I'm reminded of that time in 2015 when we had a particular petition around the COP then, and more about that later. We'll have another one later. And Christiana Figueres actually came and burst into tears when she met us as different kind of faith groups, to say actually nearly 3 million people had signed that petition, and she was saying that makes such a difference to know that there is that pressure from around the world. Sorry, Augusto, I'll let you maybe kind of do a bit of sharing with Gregorio there for a moment. Thanks.
Gregorio, brevemente, Christine, dijo que sí, que ella estaba impresionada que los pueblos indígenas y los jóvenes sí conocen el mundo, quizás hasta mejor que los políticos que están en las mesas redondas discutiendo, y que sí tienen soluciones. Entonces, es nuestra responsabilidad escuchar esas voces y presentar esas soluciones, que es diferente, ¿no? Y que eso ocurrió de algún modo en 2015 en el Acuerdo de París y en otras reuniones, y que entonces tenemos que mejorar todavía para las reuniones que vienen este año, ¿no? Y tanto la conversión personal como el pedir también a nivel global los cambios. Eso me pidió que te tradujera esto.
Thanks so much, Father Augusto. I guess I wanted to pick up some of the kind of policy questions. So, Gregorio talked very clearly about the fact that it's not enough to say 30% of it has to be of our biodiversity has to be protected. It's about 50%, and in the case of the Amazon, 80%. So, and I know that in Britain we're obviously concerned to be pushing a lot of policy messages to the UK government, and I'm sure lots of people on this webinar are doing the same. I don't know whether you're feeling that in terms of those kind of policy messages, are we getting that cut through? Is there more that we can do to be really kind of particular? I feel that certainly in the UK government, there's a lot of great talk about the targets, but what we're not seeing is the action plan that's underneath that. And actually, civil society have developed an action plan. Civil society are really kind of pushing an agenda. It's a question of just keeping struggling with that, particularly through climate and biodiversity COPs this year. I don't know, are you feeling that you're hearing kind of tangible reactions from the engagements that you're having? And Father Augusto, I mean, thinking about some of the things that you've been involved in things like the World Economic Forum and some of those UN processes over the last kind of few months, are you kind of seeing the spirit moving a little bit? So this is for you rather than you to be as a translator. So it'd be great to hear from some of your reflections over the past few months.
I agree with Ditabogo. Some things are moving thanks to a honest dialogue that is not just an change of opinions. Honest dialogue does move people because people they don't want to be part of the worst generation ever in the history of humankind. Nobody wants to be part of that generation. But we need to understand that the responsibility is connected with our lifestyles and with our development models. If we don't understand that, we can talk and talk and talk, or propose techno-fix things. No? And we are not going to heal the roots. So in my experience, we are responsible in these dialogues to be really, when they say, let's be realistic, for example, a discussion, a concrete example, a discussion with financial people the other day, or let's be realistic, the 1.5 is no longer possible. So we are targeting for the 2.5. No, let's be realistic. If we don't achieve the 1.5 century average, increase, to limit the average, the temperature increase averaging 1.5 degrees, the world as we know it will be totally different. We have never lived as human beings in that world, and it will be terrible. Gregorio was saying, if we don't protect 80% of the Amazon is like a heart of the planet. If we destroy the Amazon will become a savanna and not a rain tropical forest that regulates temperatures, rains, etc. And that will be terrible for everybody, particularly for the poor. So if you want to be realistic, let's be realistic. We cannot afford to have a plan that is not that we will live in a world that we don't know. That's totally realistic. Another example, concrete example, not just with investments, but with with companies, with extractive companies. So, well, some companies, they were agreeing with all the sustainable development goals, etc. But then we looked at the plans, at the business plans, the business models. Some big companies, the business models, they're drilling oil and gas that they will. So the business model, they know that they're aiming at 3.5 degrees temperature. Because, well, that's unacceptable. So you have to change your business model. We have to change our lifestyles, but we cannot continue to live as we live. And I'm saying this, when we say we, I say me too. No, I'm not an example of a sustainable life, but together we can. So this is the two things, from the local to the global, but also from the lifestyle to the change of business and policies. And it is possible. It's not true that it's not possible. We have created this development model. We can change it. It's not natural law. Natural law is we haven't created biodiversity. This is God's creation, and we cannot recreate it with our technology. But we can recreate a development model. That is far, far, far easier than to recreate biodiversity and God's creation.
Thanks very much, Father Augusto. So I'm going to ask each of our participants to maybe just make a final comment, if that's okay. We've got some really great comments coming through in the chat, and some really, really helpful things about price on carbon, science literacy, which is really good, a carbon neutral COP. I think it's fair to say all COPs have been saying they've been carbon neutral since 2015, but I think it's about being more clear about the plans behind that and communicating it more effectively. There's a bit of a plea about Pope Francis not flying to Glasgow. That would be interesting. But I think the other thing is about how we continue to act at a number of different levels, and that's coming out very, very closely there. And really great to see our colleagues from the Oceania and the Pacific reminding us about how different the world is if we don't, particularly for them, as in not being there, if we don't have 1.5 degrees. So thank you all for all of your comments that are coming through, which is really great. So if it's okay to ask our contributors, Ditibogo and Gregorio, and yourself, Father Augusto, to make a few final words before we move on to the final bit about the petition. So Augusto, if I can ask you to translate for Gregorio, that would be super.
Sure. Gregorio, Cristín tiene que cerrar el panel y está pidiéndonos a nosotros tres de dar un comentario final. y le gustaría si tú pudieras dar el comentario final, un mensaje final a todos nuestros oyentes y bueno, no sé, un mensaje de esperanza quizás, aunque o lo que vos quieras decirnos. Tienes el micrófono cerrado. Ahí está.
Los pueblos indígenas somos guardianes de la vida, somos defensores de la vida. Nuestra resistencia va mucho más allá de los siglos. Nosotros en este momento solo pedimos que nos ayuden a conservar, a defender la Amazonía, la vida, el agua, la tierra, la espiritualidad, la esperanza, pero también que no siga la discriminación y los asesinatos a los defensores de nuestros territorios y que nos den un espacio para hablar en todos esos escenarios globales, que nos den un espacio para hablar con los gobiernos, para que apoyen nuestras soluciones, para que entiendan cómo defendemos nuestro territorio, cómo conservamos. En estos momentos nadie está apoyando eso, solo apoyan desde lejos, pero no llegan a los territorios. Nuestra esperanza sigue viva, nuestra resistencia sigue viva. Gracias.
So he said that indigenous people are guardians of life. And he's asking us to help indigenous people to continue being guardians of life. But for that, the persecution and the killing to their people when they had to stop. And they are asking us if we can help them to create the space that they can speak out, because they know how to conserve or preserve the earth. They know how to do it, but they want to present that. Yes, of course, they are hopeful that they can continue with their life, the trees, the water, the life. But if this doesn't change, it's tough. So they are asking us to help them to be the guardians of life and promote proposals to conserve the earth in a different way.
Gracias, Gregorio. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ditiburgo, your final comments for our participants tonight.
Thank you so much. I think my final words is that, so there's a lot of climate policies already in existence, and these originated from the COP conferences, excuse me. And this year and last year has been very, very key times within the international climate policy sphere, because countries are now beginning to submit their national determined contributions, which is kind of their way of saying it's kind of their plan on how they're going to reduce emissions and try and reach that 2-degree Celsius target. I think that's a very important place where ordinary people that aren't necessarily engaged in policy as well, it's something that you need to find out from your government, read through the document, and engage your government as well, because that is in essence your country, your government's plan and how they're going to do localized climate action in your country. So please engage with that. And if policy is not your space, that's okay. We have other set of skills, you have other things that you're really good at. If that's education, then please do help us in teaching. Please do pray for the climate. Please, we need the farmers. We need everyone else that has indigenous knowledge as well. We need the indigenous community as well to share their knowledge so that we're able to then address and adapt to the effects of climate change. Please also engage young people. We are full of ideas. We are here and we are ready to work. So please do engage young people as well. Don't forget local, rural communities. Engage with them as well. The church also needs to step up a bit more in this, and we encourage the church to step up more a bit and claim their place as one of the most influential bodies in society. And also maybe that will then help decision makers as well, help the government engage more and connect more with people in society. I've always said that I wish that we could have like a conference or a webinar with all stakeholders in the climate crisis, so we can iron out these things a bit more, iron out what we think the just transition means and how we see our roles in addressing the climate crisis as well, in conserving our biodiversity and our world and our planet. But I really think this was a very fruitful discussion, and I look forward to many more in the future. Thank you.
Isabella, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us tonight and your immense experience. I think with the challenges of translation, I don't think we've heard enough from you, but thank you so much for that. Really excellent. Father Augusto, on final kind of reflection point from you, and thank you for the number of hats you've worn this evening. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, Christine. I would like to thank you both Ditsebago and Gregorio, because they have reminded us that we are human beings. We were young one day, and everyone has its own culture that really bring us to, or can cultivate the best of us. So why is important my reminder, and why is important? Because if you want to work on politics, on economics, on business, on education, spirituality, we first have to remind ourselves that we are human beings. So, and we have root and roots that are producing root and fruits. So we need to heal those roots to produce abundant fruits. Life could be abundant. And I will finish. Look at I have the Amazon things behind me and people behind me. So it's to remind ourselves that everything what we do in the dicastery is for them. It's for to care for the earth, to care for people. But I will finish with a parable, if I may, or paraphrasing a parable of the gospel. That is the parable of the sower. So what should we do now, although that we are listening? The Pope told us this to the dicastery, to the Vatican COVID Commission. So I will want to share it with you. What is our role today? Well, we are not the sower or the seed, because that's God and the word. But we are neither the plant nor the fruit. We have to ensure that we are fertile soil, that we are not rocky soil and fertile soil with root and roots. We have to ensure that we are fertile soil, and then the fruits will come up. The good policies will come up if we have root, and the good economy, the new model will come up. But without that, it won't, because we will have some tweaks here and there, but we won't produce this radical change. And one of the few people that can really move for that radical change are those people embedded in their spirituality. Indigenous people, religious, but not necessarily everybody who is religious, but those really religious people who address the world as a God's creation, and who address the others as brothers and sisters. That will produce the transformation that is required. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for those words at the end. I think that sense of what is our role, who are we in this current crisis is so critical, and there is no single answer to that. And it's really vital, and I love that sense of fertile soil. Brilliant. So thank you all so much for that powerful and inspirational conversation. Now, I did say to you who are watching, don't go just yet, because I hope I want to tell you about something. I hope you're all feeling inspired and energized by tonight's conversation and ready to engage. And 2021 is such a critical year. And as we've heard tonight, action is needed at all levels, and action is possible at all levels. I think we have to, as Pope Francis has challenged us to dare to dream, to dare to be different, to dare to put this into practice. And I want to encourage all of you to get involved in whatever activities in your own countries to raise the messages of Laudato Si with your decision makers in your countries as they take actions and make decisions around, COVID preparations for these critical conferences. Ditebogo talked about the fact that countries are having to do their nationally determined contributions. There are processes in place. It's about making sure voices are influencing them. So find the campaigns and actions that are taking place in your context, and please get engaged with them. And tonight we're very pleased to launch this Healthy Planet, Healthy People petition. It calls for world leaders to address the climate and biodiversity crises together as part of our COVID response. And it's about increased ambition, equity, the protection of rights, and in particular, the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. So the kind of messages that we've heard tonight. And obviously, it lifts up the key contribution of faith communities into these discussions around nature, the earth, and our planet. We've heard it tonight, the importance of nature, the importance of our planet, the importance of our biodiversity and our relationship with it, not our dominance over it. So it's really, really important. So I'm really pleased that tonight we are launching this petition. It's come out of proposals and ideas shared by many Catholic organisations from across the world, and we'll be reaching out to people over the next few weeks. It's open to all Catholic organisations who would like to join, to be co-sponsors, to integrate it into their work. You name it. There's details on the screen now, thecatholicpetition.org. So please do get involved and support it. So on that note, it's a final opportunity to just say thank you, muchas gracias to Titibogo Gregorio, particularly to Father Augusto, who stepped in to be a fantastic translator at the last minute. Thank you to all behind the scenes that have helped make tonight such a wonderfully inspiring and energizing webinar. Thank you. God bless you all. Keep working hard, and solidarity with everybody. Good night and God bless.